Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. Good to see you this morning. I'm Bill Davis, sitting in for Alex Lindsay, who, by the way, pinged me this morning and said that I could let you know that he's been down with COVID. He caught it a couple of days ago. He is doing fine, and he is going to be back very soon. But he let me know so that I could let you know, and it's kind of a little warning there. Be careful out there, everybody, because these things are serious, and everything's going to be okay. So our standard thing this morning, if you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on Office Hours Global, officehours.global, the website. Our first hour is a general discussion of production-related questions. The second hour is typically a deeper dive into something. Today we're looking at video in this frame. We are looking for your suggestions on what we can talk about on Thursday from now on. Thursday's kind of going to be the video day, the same way that Tuesday is going to be the audio day. So if you have suggestions for themes, show topics, and things like that, please put them in. Please stick around for the second hour, and we're going to keep track of everything you suggest, and this is one way you can influence how the show gets developed. Okay, that's all the preamble stuff. It's time to go to the questions. Dennis, I believe you're doing it, so let's dive in.
Thanks, Bill, and get well soon, Alex. Our first question today comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, Conversations with Tony Mobley is a masterwork that not only teaches people about each other, but helps us deeply understand each other and our unique histories and challenges. How can we bring Conversations with Tony Mobley to the broader recognition and respect it deserves outside the Office Hours community?
It's a very good question, and I know I've really enjoyed many of Tony's shows. It's been fabulous to watch him develop as a host, and the guests that he's bringing in are fascinating people. And I do agree with the question posed here. I mean, it's nice to be able to go beyond the surface. I know it was months here when I first started back in the beginning of the show before I really felt like I had gotten to know some of the people on the panel. And he's doing that deeper dive into people, not just with those of us in the Office Hours community, but from people from the outside too. And it's great to watch. So let's move on. Sky Gleason's going to have some notes on this.
Well, again, coming from broadcast, I started my career in promotions and marketing, and doing the show is hard. And finding your voice is a challenge that you accepted as Tony has. The crew behind the production is continuing to get better and broader. So now the challenge is, how do you find your audience? And potentially it might take some promotions and marketing, because like everything, it's a specific style, concept, construct. It may not be for everybody, but it is for somebody. And now the challenge is, how do you find that? And you got to cast the net. And sometimes you may have to do some kind of marketing, but never think that a single solution is the answer. You might have to, buy some ad time on certain social medias or places that you think people that would like this kind of content. So that's the history of promotions and marketing. It's just, you don't know where your audience is. You just got to go out there and keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully they'll find you.
And the man himself, Tony, your thoughts?
If we can, I want to hear what Mitchell has to say first, if that's okay.
Absolutely. No, let's pop over to Mitch.
Happy to pop in. I think it's as far as getting the word out, I think as we ramp up Office Hours, I think you're going to come along on the process too, Tony. Other than your normal word-of-mouth expansion and social media expansion. But Alex said that there's a chance that we could have millions of viewers. I'm sure that means you're going to get millions of viewers, because it's a natural extension from what we do here.
Okay, Tony's right back. Tony, what do you think?
So first, let me say, Douglas, thank you so much for that great question. It is something that I have been wrestling with. And I know you guys are tired of hearing me say this, but I am thankful to the community for the opportunity to even have conversation with Tony Mobley. And I will confess that I have been in deep dialogue with Dr. Chris Clark about, and the team about moving forward and how we can be more proactive in terms of having more viewership outside of the community. It is an ongoing process. We are not static. One of the changes that is coming soon is that we have reduced the amount of time that Conversations is on. We were on for 90 minutes. We will now be going only on for 1 hour moving forward. There are some things that I am going to do that is going to, I think, help. The initial thing is that the introduction of Conversations is going to be streamlined. I am going to actually encourage people to watch older Conversations to be able to sort of get the history, where I sort of rehash it every week. And so, and also per Ken Jordan and the team, we are going to stop having Tony Mobley do all of the things at the end of Conversations, and we're going to have a scrolling script. And so that's all coming soon. But again, this is a walk that I did not anticipate, and I am so happy that we've had this opportunity. And I want to thank all of you who have been on, and some of you who will be on in the very near future. We didn't have Conversation last night because my guest got COVID as well. So, and so Alex is in good company in terms of having to deal with that. I just want to say, again, I am thankful to this community and all the people that have supported all of the iterations of Conversation with Tony Mobley that's taken place over the years. And again, thank you all so much for the participation.
Cool. And Kenneth Jones wants to.
Okay, well, one of the things we used to say in retail was the secret to that is find out what people want and sell it to them. So I think it might be helpful if we, as members of the OH community, could perhaps do a little investigation of other interview-style programs and watch those, and then mention in comments the fact that we know Tony, and help in comments to other people's broadcasts, spread a little salt about Tony's program and perhaps get it working. All of this stuff takes time, of course, but if we never say anything about it outside of our little circle of friends, the chances of our influencing other people to come into it will be small. So make it early and often, and mention it to every place you also watch.
Yeah, I also just want to note, these started as labs kind of as we were working out how to do things in this new format with this new tool we have. And there's so much innovation there. And when Ken was mentioned on the website, I'm learning so much about how modern content gets distributed just by being a part of these things. And I think it's been a fascinating process. But I can see that we are now in the process of starting to turn these into real shows. And I'm just very excited about the future of all this. Tony, you had a last thought before we move on?
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to Ken for his comments. I absolutely encourage that. I also wanted to mention that thanks to Taylor Sonderhouse, Conversation with Tony Mobley is on the radio. And so it is on the radio, and it is a local radio station, I believe it's Delhi, Ohio. But the good thing about it is that because of the radio station, it is a part of the TuneIn radio network, so that through the radio station, you can tune in to Conversation with Tony Mobley through the TuneIn app on any device. And so I want to say thank you to Taylor for that, and the team for making that happen.
It's amazing. So many of the people here have so many skills outside of what we do here, and they're leveraging them and bringing them to us and informing them about what's possible. The world's being rewired in a funny sort of way. All right, let's move on to the next question.
The next question comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida, and he asks advice on a ticketing or order platform that works well for events. This is for internal corporate use. We now use JIRA, but it is horrible for event order and tracking. Thanks.
I'm unfortunately pretty ignorant about this topic. I don't do much in that area, and it looks like we haven't had anybody raise their hand who does a lot of ticketing stuff. So I think this might end up, John Preto has some thoughts. John, go ahead.
So the challenge here is every time you meet with the client, they all have special requirements on ticketing. Eventbrite is probably the best overall out there, but you'll find that it doesn't do everything perfectly. But as far as the platform goes, I highly recommend Eventbrite. I've used it a lot. We ended up writing our own platform, so we had complete flexibility, but check out Eventbrite.
John, what are the 2 or 3 things that you found that you didn't have access to through some of these turnkey packages that you needed specifically?
Buying tickets in multiple groups. And so our client had like an administrator trying to buy multiple tickets for their institute. And there's no easy way to automate that process in Eventbrite. Was one
interesting. So it's just one ticket for one person. That's kind of how it's configured. Yeah. Okay, I can see the sense of that. All right, that looks like it's time to move on. Next question.
Next question is from John Preto in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now that Nikon has followed Canon in a statement that they are no longer developing SLRs, can we bow our heads in a moment of silence?
And we start with Roscoe Jones.
Well, I actually think it might be a moment of silence because, the one sound that we're going to miss next is the sound of those shutters going click, 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 click. And that's how you go to an event and you suddenly hear all these cameras go off at the same time. You know somebody's about to walk into the room or start their speech or just made a gesture of some sign to pay attention to. Or if you're in the camera well at a sporting event, all of a sudden you hear all this click, 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 click. That's going to be gone probably too. But the global shutters, they're still going to be around until we get the global shutter issue electronic.
Tom Ferguson.
Wow, I didn't even think of that angle. But this is kind of a passing of baton. I mean, we went from film SLRs to digital SLRs, and now with the new mirrorless cameras, the mount flange to the sensor distance will promote new lens optics and designs. I'm rather excited about that. But also the electronic viewfinders finally give us instant confirmation of our creative exposure choices.
Sky Gleason.
This is news to me. I guess I'm still sitting here because my first camera was I'm sorry, Dennis. I refer to it as a Nichromat, but I understand you drink out of a polystyrene cup, so we have differences, but we can all get along. The evolution of capturing an image is ongoing because, again, they've got to sell you something. They need to continue to change things. About the time you get mass market, you need to change something so you can, again, sell you something new. So this is big news, and Nikon's probably not going away, but the format of how they capture, how we as consumers capture images, and also the immediate thought that came to mind was 2 different inaugurations were posted from the back of the event. And one was everybody was clicking with their cameras of some kind, but then shortly, the next inauguration, everybody had their iPhone up and were taking selfies, using their own cameras. So we've seen an evolution in a very short time in image capture. So yes, a moment of silence, I think, is good, but no, image capture is going to keep happening.
Slightly sad, but inevitable. I mean, the whole idea of a DSLR back when it first came out, that idea that instead of having to use a rangefinder, you would take the light beam that was coming through the lens, use a mirror system to put it into the eyepiece so that you could see exactly the shot you were framing, exactly as it would be imaged to the film. And then at the moment you click the shutter, that mirror would drop out of the way and the same light would hit the film, was revolutionary. And it made... I think it really enhanced the creativity and certainly the instant accessibility to creativity. When you don't have to think like you can with a viewfinder or other kind of camera about the composition of the shot, when you can see it and change it and make decisions in real time, that really made photography a lot easier for a lot of people. And I'm sure it brought a lot of artists to the medium. now that we're moving into mirrorless, and it works much more like your phone, which is you're seeing that real-time display all the time. And when you electronically touch a shutter thing or one of the buttons, you just capture that image. Does the same thing. And Micro Four Thirds not having to flip a mirror out of the way, same thing. So I just think this is a natural evolution. I too feel a little sadness in that the sound of that mirror flipping up isn't going to be part of it going forward. But maybe somebody will digitize it and you can put that on your phone if you want. Who knows? Kenneth Jones has a last thought.
Well, the only thing I can add is that the first camera I had was Pentax. Well, actually, it was a Brownie Star Flash, but that was, prehistoric. The point here is that you buy the hardware that does the job you want to do. So I don't particularly care whether it says Nikon or Canon or whatever. And as you're right, corporations come and go, and so do products. As long as the thing you use does what you want it to do, it really doesn't matter to me what name it has.
Fair enough. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, how can you be a tenacious advocate for someone's interests or the interests of your organization while building a trustworthy and amicable relationship with the entity you're advocating to?
Roscoe Jones.
I'm going to talk about the large academic institution I just came out of, which is the largest in California for a state school. If, in a student, it's a large bureaucratic system. So just helping them move through the bureaucratic system, helping them with a specific task, they may need a parking permit and have no idea where even to go get it and that kind of stuff. That's not necessarily being tenacious, but it's just being very helpful and knowing that you have some information that you can convey to them, and you build that relationship over time. You may see that student as a freshman, you may not have them as a sophomore, but then you may get them again as a junior. And if they know who you are or that you've helped them in the past, there's a relationship. They'll come back and look for more information. And then hopefully when you get them in the classroom, you can actually teach them something.
Yeah, finding people is that, the larger an organization gets, the easier it is to kind of be anonymous and stick in your own little cubbyhole and not get out there. And it's one of the things I had to learn because I'm naturally a little bit of introverted, and I had to realize. And it really happened to me, I think in my first days in NAB, I kept thinking that I was going to see things. And there was an evolution at one point where I started realizing I really wasn't going to see things. I was going to meet people. And that if I was going to do that successfully, I had to develop some skills for meeting people. And that may have been the original skills that led me later to being at least half decent as an interviewer, because you learn to be interested in other people to get them engaged in the subject that you're talking to them about. And all of that seems to go together. But for me, it's continuing to keep your focus on people and trying to identify people that you resonate with and that can help you. And hopefully, it might be someone assigned to you as a guide when you're coming into the organization. But it's something to pay attention to, I believe. Let's move to the next question.
Jerry Hoyle from Wesley Chapel, North Carolina says, I remember the preference here for the T5 SSD over the T7. Since the T5 has been discontinued and the going price has doubled, does anyone have any experiences with the Sandisk Extreme SSD?
And Mitch Hill's going to start us here.
I do not. Generally, Sandisk makes great memory, and it's fast and reliable. If you get down to the memory cards, which are not quite the SSDs, nowadays, you have to buy the brand that the camera was associated with. For example, if you're buying a S/S memory card for your Sony Venice, best to get a Sony branded one. Same thing with Aeroflex cameras, Airy to be exact. As far as the SSDs go, there's a wide gamut of really good ones out there. Best to check with the manufacturer to see how it works. I do miss the T5 because that was a great little piece of hardware.
Peter Sargent.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the preference came from everyone discovering the hard way that Blackmagic Design publishes an acceptable list of solid-state drives. And a lot of us went and got the T7 not checking that list the first time and discovering it wasn't there and having to send them back and get the T5. So I would second Mitchell's comment about not only check with the manufacturer of the disc, but check with the manufacturer of the equipment that you're hooking it up to see if it works. They publish that list. So,
Sky.
I just recently purchased this from B&H, and I didn't notice that it was double the price. So I'm not sure what again, I'm learning things. That's why I come here. I didn't know that had been discontinued. So maybe I got the last one off the shelf. I don't know.
I can reflect what Peter said. For a while there, T7s had difficulty if you were connecting them to a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera with the same cable in the same circumstance. It just would not record as well. In fact, we had errors where it didn't take the signals. And so I think for a while, the word went out, don't go to T7s, do T5s. It reminds me also, though, that technology does change. And, that may have been at some point solved by an engineering change in firmware or something like that. And it may be that when they took a shot at the T9s or whatever the next generation was of those hard drives, that they fixed it. It's something that has always plagued me. You get, particularly on the internet, you get this doesn't work or this is bad, and it is. It's a legitimate discussion point. But then through this agile software development process, somebody will figure that out, fix it, and then the information that you're still carrying with you has become obsolete. I'm not saying that's true, that T7s now work equally with T5s in Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras. I'm saying that's a process that I have seen happen over and over again, and you have to constantly update kind of your knowledge bank in your head, or you're going to get into using out-of-date knowledge. Dennis wants to pop in on this.
But there was a mention of the fact that the T5 was being discontinued a few weeks ago. So I picked one up on Amazon, and I actually found a returned one that was quite a lot cheaper than the standard price.
Excellent. Mitch Hill wants to finish this up.
Yeah, just checked inventory at B&H. There's plenty of them at $249.99. So go for it.
Okay, next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, one disadvantage of working from home mentioned in an article is that managers are less likely to ask remote workers to act as pre-testers of new ideas. How do you guard against being trapped in analysis paralysis that can derail an event, group, or project?
I've always loved the phrase analysis paralysis because I've seen it happen so many times, particularly with equipment purchases. I can't tell you the number of people I've been in conversations with who are thinking of buying a new camera, and I check in with them a year later and they're still thinking of buying a new camera because they're so afraid of gear acquisition syndrome failure. And at some point, you've just got to pull the trigger. Let's go to Roscoe Jones.
One thing that the university does is when you get that ultimate work from home, which is retirement, they give you emeriti status, which is to keep you attached, keep you around. You have more time. You can do more testing. You hopefully are aware of the new things that are going on or discussing those, and you just have more time. So I think that's one way to deal with it, is give people, status, even though they're working from home or no longer around the organization.
And Sky.
I guess what I'm hearing is the difference between a business and a hobby. And if you're doing a business, you're going to have things that you have, equipment, services, software, hardware, that are going to help you accomplish your task, make your product, create your service for the other that you're going to receive income from. So I get it. The earliest days of computers, because they had been giant buildings in the past, and now that the democratization of them and gotten so small, and the accessibility, I get that we're still in some people's mind working with these big giant hardware versus things that are kind of disposable. So again, it is an attitude. At what point, like art, is it going to be up on the wall versus still tweaking on it? So I think that's the analysis paralysis. I feel the pain, but at some point, that computer is going to get old. You're going to have to move on.
Kenneth, real quick.
I think maybe one of the issues in the reticence to explore new ideas in a work from home environment would be the inability to define that environment adequately to provide good results on a test. In an office environment, you have the ability to immediately and accurately control the periphery of what's happening and what's being tested. And so I think the solution is to adequately define the environment in which this new idea needs to be tested. And then at that point, it shouldn't matter where in the world the test occurs.
Yeah, I also think that the managers, there's really a step up needed in terms of you've got remote workforces now. So identifying the people who are going to be good pre-testers of new ideas and finding a way to loop them into that is going to be part of the manager's brief from now on, because I don't think, as we talk about here a lot and as Alex mentions a lot, I don't think we're fully going back to pure bullpen in an office type working ever. And that means that management skills are going to have to change equivalently. Let's go on to the next topic.
And you thought you hated software subscriptions, says Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware. Want heated seats in your BMW? There's a micro subscription for that. What next?
Oh dear, Mitchell.
Yeah, we know how much we hated it when Adobe announced their subscription system, and we had no choice. We just simply had to buckle under and deal with it. But I just read yesterday that BMW on their new cars are going to release incremental subscriptions. They call them micro subscriptions. So if you want your seats to be heated, you're going to pay them something every month. If you want GPS, you're going to pay them something. So apparently they're taking a page from the Adobe catalog of subscriptions. I really do hate it, especially what happens if you miss a payment or something. All of a sudden you're going to freeze, you can't get somewhere, all that kind of stuff.
Roscoe Jones.
Now, Mitchell, don't believe everything you read on the internet unless I post the link.
Are you saying, Roscoe, that this is
a Technica article? Oops. Yes, you need Snopes on this one.
Is this an April Fool's gag?
It's not April Fool's. It's in Korea, I guess. There's some sort of model where they can subscribe to something, but it's got blown out of proportion as if it's going around the world. So we'll see, maybe. But they do have a record, because they're in the article. It states about the one that I posted. It states about how Apple CarPlay was a $80 a year subscription when it first came out on a BMW, a subscription. But the reaction from the customers was so negative that they did not pursue it, and they took that model away. So I'll go over there.
Mitch wants to finish up here.
I appreciate that, Roscoe, and like everything is on the internet is true, but you're talking to a guy that usually trades his car in when his free Sirius XM subscription expires, so that's where I am.
All right, well, do your own research, and let's move on to the next question.
Kenneth Jones from Seattle says, we were discussing the ATEM series on social media last night. Do any of that product line accept balanced audio in the onboard microphone inputs? I thought they were unbalanced stereo.
We don't have any in there, but I think everything is unbalanced. So you very seldom find balanced lines using the 3.5 millimeter connector. Not that it's impossible, obviously. We've talked about balanced audio before, and it just needs a positive and a negative leg with respect to ground to function. And there are certainly 3.5-inch connectors that have the connector count to enable that, but you don't usually see it. Usually you see balanced lines terminated in XLR connectors. Roscoe, you have thoughts?
Well, as soon as you explained it out to any of that product line, which the question asked, then you go to the cameras. The cameras have XLR inputs that are balanced, and then you push it over the HDMI, and you go popping right into your ATEM that way. So that is the way that you can, one way that you can get a balanced microphone into an ATEM.
Fair enough. Let's move on
Mini,
to the next
I should say ATEM Mini or Extreme or ISO, not because an ATEM is a product line that has all kinds of things in the high end.
Okie doke. Moving on.
Tom Ferguson from Phoenix, Arizona asks, did anyone score a good deal on Amazon Day?
And we're going to start with Tony. We got a lot of action on this one.
So I purchased an Apple TV 4K on yesterday, and the total cost for me was $88. It was a 64 gigabyte Apple TV, and so I feel like I got a good deal, because the normal price I think is $199 for it.
Absolutely.
So that was my purchase.
Cool. Mitch?
I got a last year's iPad. I said it was a Pro on After Hours. Just should have seen the rush to Amazon. I got it for $299, and of course I mislabeled it. It's just a regular 64 gigabyte, but it's nice. And for that price, I can now remote in on my Sony camera. There's my little face and all the settings on it.
Cool. Tom Ferguson.
Well, while I didn't score a good deal on Amazon, during Amazon Day. I did the week before. I bought 5 hard drives, and on Amazon Day, they were discounted 30%, and they were also $30 higher than I had paid the week before. So be a savvy shopper.
Oh, the old bait and switch thing. And yes, our retail price is going up for a month so we can discount it back to where we were before in the store in the neighborhood. And yeah, crazy sky.
I'm just going to say Amazon's the winner here, obviously, because they've continued to train us to go to their source to the point that Walmart said, yeah, we're not going to play. And so they didn't make as much money as last year, but they still are in the billions. So Amazon, I think, is the winner.
I think it was an interesting rebranding, though, of closeout sale. We've got a lot of inventory in these areas. We got boxes of those widgets in the back. Let's drop them 30% and see if we can move some of these. But you brand it differently, and it becomes
no such thing as a free horse.
There you go. Next question.
Chris Taylor from Carlsbad, California says, looking for a reasonably priced wireless system. Does the panel have any thoughts on the Rode 2 versus the DJI Mic, or others?
Peter Sargent will start us.
So, and I shared some audio of this with John Preto earlier this week. Last week, I took delivery of a Comica system, which this is the receiver, and there are 4 of these wireless transmitters. And they're a little bigger than the Rode 2, but there are 4 of them coming into one receiver, and you can either let the receiver mix the 4 channels together and give you one audio out, which can be either XLR or 3.5 millimeter into a camera or into a mixer, or you can separate all 4 channels out and send it into a mixer. So you can actually mix the audio however you want to do it. And it was $350 for 4 receivers and 4 transmitters and 1 receiver.
I think there's a lot of testing ahead on those because there's so many new options, and wireless signal transmission is such a hot area right now that I think it's going to be interesting to find out how everything works.
And Mitch, I was going to say, John could comment. He listened to the audio and it sounded pretty good, he said.
Okay. Well, John, click your clicker. We're going to go to Mitch right now and then Sky.
Yeah, Bill, I agree. The thing in this particular range of wireless mic systems that they're running at 2.4, and they're great at 5, 6, 20 feet, something like that. Go ahead, Peter.
Mine are running on UHF.
Well, that's where you want to be. I was going to suggest...
Because I can go out 200 feet. I've tested it out to 200 feet.
I was going to suggest the sound devices, but that's outside that range. They are UHF. And Sony makes a cool one. If you have a Sony camera, it just plugs into the M1 slot on the top of the Sony camera, and it negotiates and communicates with the receiver. It's kind of cool.
And Sky, your thoughts?
I just wanted to bring in a report. I just used my original Rode. I do have the Rode 2 as well, but I had a quick interview, used my iPhone 13, a couple of adapters, plugged in the receiver into my phone, and then put the microphone up on a stand near about, 1.5 foot away from the person, just out of shot. Even actually used the dead cat version of the little fuzzy, and it worked. And the part that really surprised me, I hadn't used it in probably 3 months, and the charge was still good. I hardly had to, charge it back up. So there's just a little report on the Rode systems.
And Roscoe Jones.
I'm going to double down on what Sky just said. He used the Rode Go 2 on a funeral or a celebration of life that was taking place in a stadium, a very large stadium, and it worked just great. I was only about 15 feet from where the podium was. The crowd was up in the stands, but the cameras and stuff were down in the front. So very specific applications. Wireless works good, but boy, I'll tell you, buying cheap stuff otherwise is really tough to recommend because it's a headache. Bad cheap wireless is very common.
Yeah, I will say, though, that it seems like somebody must have done a chip or something that does the A to D, then the D to A reconversion, and that chipset in the receivers and transmitters must now be a deep commodity because these used to be much more complex rigs in terms of the wiring. I don't know if you've ever been inside one of the Electrosonics or Sony things. There's a lot of componentry in there, and it seems like they're making them smaller, and there's a lot less circuit traces, and there are a lot less things going on. I think it would be interesting to get somebody who's serious about forensic audio and to look at the signals and just assure everybody that you're not losing something, the human voice is not a particularly challenging bandwidth, certain opera singers set aside. But, in terms of clarity of human speech, a lot of microphones, even inexpensive microphones, do a decent job of making a clear signal out of what's hitting the diaphragm of the microphone and going onto some storage medium. So I'd be interested in looking and seeing if things like overtones or resistance to outside interference and things like that, what you get as you move up my gut tells me there are things you get as you move up the food chain there, but I don't know what they are, and I'd love to be informed of that. So it's just interesting things, a whole interesting thing. So Tuesday's audio ask questions, and we'll see what happens. Move on to the next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana says, I'm looking for something like the Comica XLR Microphone CVM-V02O for training needs clear vocals, but must be at a price we can throw away after the XLR hookup. It's in a noisy environment and in all likelihood will get wet and ruined.
That's something that you probably wouldn't have been able to get a few years ago, but I'm thinking some of these inexpensive transmitters might work for you, but they're looking for an XLR microphone, just the microphone, at a price you can throw away. I wonder what you consider that, is a $50 microphone, because there are plenty of $50 dynamics. It's also important what you're sending it into, because whether you need the sound of a condenser type powered microphone or just a dynamic, and how it's going to interface with the equipment is important. Roscoe has some thoughts.
Well, I'd adopt what we did with the early Polsons. It seemed like 1 out of 10 Polsons from the factory weren't working, just failed upon. So buy more than you need, test them all. I don't think these are for COVID reasons that you're sealing them. I think it's the environment they're going to go in. It's the reason you're throwing them away. But I would just buy multiples, test them, see what you get out of them, and make the decision based on a quantity, not a one-off kind of question. I don't think the model at $32, I'm not expecting much, but you'd really be surprised. They could be really good.
Yeah, and mic technique is going to make a difference too. If this is a handheld type microphone, I don't know if it's a handheld or a lavalier.
It's a lavalier.
It's a lavalier. Okay, so the positioning of that mic to get good signal to noise ratio, the closer you can get it to the speaking person's mouth without getting like so far up that you're under a chin or something like that, which can diminish high frequency. So do a little looking on the internet about mounting lavaliers. I mean, you mount it on a shoulder and it's great there. And when they turn away, it's nowhere near as great. So you've got things like that to think about. Usually the closest you can get it under someone's mouth, still without getting a big lump of face in the way, is probably going to be your best signal to noise ratio. Peter Sargent has a thought before we move on.
I just had a question because it kind of struck me. It says, likelihood will get wet and ruined. Do you really want a wired mic that goes
normally
into XLR back to a mixer or something?
Yeah, at worst you're going to get 48 volts of phantom power, I would suspect, which is not going to hurt you badly. I mean, it's not like
what about the mixer on the other end though?
Yeah. Well, good point. If you're going to be in the rain, you probably want to err on the side of caution here. Any kind of physical wire running from something under a tent maybe that could get hit. Yeah. Interesting thing. Continue to come back. Let us know what you do, how it works out. Mitchell has a thought before we leave this topic.
I just wanted to point out, we call those stunt microphones.
Yeah, just something real cheap.
Like stunt cameras,
Yeah. What was the space folks gave? Sacrificial microphones.
Crash cam.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Next question.
The next question comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. And he says, how do you stay top of mind with clients who pace their projects with a lot of time in between?
Let's start with Mitchell, go on to Roscoe, and then Sky. Mitchell.
I find begging works really well.
Roscoe Jones.
This is why the game of golf was invented. You spend time with the executives out on the course between projects, and you talk about, what the next project is. You'd be amazed at how many deals are made out there.
Sky Gleason.
Yeah, not surprised. Unfortunately, I don't play golf, but I do drink beer and lots of coffee. And consequently, I do make coffee cups with my company name on them so that name branding is hopefully in front of them. But also, yeah, it is a relational situation. The challenge with some of these projects are that person moved on to a different company. And so the new person doesn't know you. So that's also the challenge in these, what Chad's, struggling with here. So I'm finding LinkedIn is starting to become an acquaintance, a place to hang out and keep your name, your brand, your idea in front of people that only need you when they need you. And that's the hard part.
Peter Sargent.
Oh, I agree with Roscoe and Sky completely. I'm not a golfer, but I do drink lots of. I haven't been known to drink lots of coffee or have lots of adult beverages in the evening. But the other thing that I always made a point to do is, we used to call them secretaries. I'll call them assistants. All the executives all had one of those working for them, and you get to know them. If they like you, you'll get in the door, and you can. I just need 15 minutes to talk to so and so, just to check in, see how things are going. You don't necessarily bring up the project, but you kind of keep your ear to the ground that way and listen to what does the client have to say and keep going.
Yeah, I'm going to 100% agree with that. Admin management, we used to call it. And that's just the relationships you establish with the gatekeepers to decision makers are critical. In fact, the relationships you make with everybody in an organization, down to the person sitting, the receptionist, that young man or young woman, usually they're starting their career, just being good to them, being nice to them, paying attention to them, not ignoring them. The best of them, and they often hire very bright people to do those things because they're public facing. But I can't tell you the number of times that person has risen through the organization to the point where they could actually remember that we had treated them not like functionaries that could be ignored, but like really important people, or at least, someone to be kind to and to try to help. It's proved. I'm also going to tell you one thing that I'm going to give you a little one of the secrets that's really helped me in the last 10 years. We often now don't wait for them to do projects. In my video practice, we are doing videos that are almost at the point of being usable and suggesting, we make appointments with existing clients to say, we've got something to show you. Can we show it to you? And then we, on our own dime, make the video using clip video and other things, but we make them to solve problems that we suspect the client has. And our close rate on those is upwards of 70%. Some people cannot visualize from a pitch idea, but if you can give them an actual piece of content that they can review, the lights all go on. And instead of the concept about, well, how will this look? The question becomes, could you adapt this part of it to do that? And suddenly you've got engagement. So let's move on. That's just a tip that's working incredibly well for us.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. How can you build virtual events that go beyond pushing content to an audience to build enduring relationships and interactions within said audience?
Roscoe Jones is going to start us here.
Well, everything I know about this, I've learned on office hours because, it's really, if you look at Blue and some of the people here that are just amazing at doing these events, they engage the audience. Mukana gives the audience a chance to give feedback. So anything you can do to engage the individual in what's going on in front of them on the screen, or if you can make it personal, something like Conversation with Tony Mobley. I mean, it's an amazing depth that he gets out of it. He has a great set of questions that he's kind of, I know he has kind of I'm going to always ask these specific questions of a guest, but they are very deep searching questions or give the opportunity for that individual to give a very long answer. And it just builds that audience. It builds that I want to come back and hear what the next person that he's going to have on, how that person responds to those questions. So depth of content, and then give the interactive ability.
Absolutely. Next question.
The next question comes from Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. Can we share the Office Hours 2.0 that's going out to YouTube? It looks great. And he adds, just wanted a quick overview on what is shown on YouTube.
I'm not sure I know exactly. So can we share the Office Hours 2.0 that's going out to YouTube? You mean to somehow fold it back into the show? Tony, you raised your hand here. What did you mean by this specifically?
Yeah, so this is really sort of a question for new viewers or new people to Office Hours. I was just wondering if we could, the team maybe could, and I really was sort of hoping that Dennis might be able to speak to this, be able to share with those who are watching on YouTube what is actually going out. Because when I look at it, it looks really, really good. And I was just wondering what the process was that is used. Is it HDR? I don't know the actual language to describe it, but I just wanted to be able to share it with those people who are not necessarily a part of the community, but are watching it. What is this? Why does this look so good? Is it I'm sure that it has more to do with, what we are actually doing or manufacturing so that it goes out to YouTube. And I know the YouTube is 1080, but what's the process?
And Tony, where are you monitoring this signal that is impressing you so much? Are you watching it off of like an iDevice or something like that as opposed to a computer monitor?
I am watching it on an iPad Pro. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I think that's one of the pipelines. I think HDR, the way that we're putting it out, and Alex will, when he comes back, he will talk over and over about the technical details of what they are pushing. We're pretty much on the leading edge of this, I think. And, Dennis has popped in, so let's let Dennis describe what they're doing. Dennis?
Thanks. Yeah, so what we're actually sending to YouTube at the moment is, as Tony said, is 1080. It's standard a dynamic range, not HDR. We have the option to stream in 4K and in HDR, but that involves a higher cost. So at the moment, we've not been doing that. But essentially, there are two things that go into making the video look as good as it does. One is that everyone has good cameras that they've spent a long time getting right, likewise with their lighting and with their audio. That all goes into Zoom. Then there are 5 Mac Minis that are taking 4 streams each out of Zoom and sending those into an ATEM constellation, which then mixes everything. So that's how you get the different views, not just the individual shots of people, but the gallery showing all the people on the panel, and the super sources, which we go to when we show the question. And all of that is then controlled by Isadora, which is effectively a graphical programming language, which tells the switcher how to behave in different circumstances given the data it's receiving from Zoom. And then we have a technical director who's cutting it all together.
Thank you for that walkthrough. Sky has a note, and then Tony's coming back. Sky.
Well, on day 842, there's a whole lot of practice that's been going on. And so, Tony, you and I have walked or driven past a television station, and we have no idea all of the wires and the engineers and the makeup and the staff and the producers and the executives and the sales. It's very complicated. And I think Dennis barely scratched the surface of what has happened over the last 840 days of intentionality of communicating and making it a high quality. And that's, again, to the credit of Mr. Lindsay, of saying, creating our priorities of what he saw this potentially happen because he's watched it happen in other events. And for many years. So I think that a tech tour is one thing, but I think the heart and the attitude is also what is felt and seen here.
Yeah, that resonates with me because my wife was on local television back in Phoenix when we lived there, and I'll never forget her coming home and saying, somebody said the nicest thing to me, and I said, what? And he said, well, I messed up a little on the show today, and the floor director came up to me and said, don't worry, we're doing it all again tomorrow. So this iteration process, the fact that we do things a lot. So Tony's going to weigh in, and then Mitchell. So Tony?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Dennis, for that explanation. And I think that because of the complexities that he just shared, that we probably should share it every now and then, because I'm sure that there are new people that are coming in and they're just, wowed, but not understanding how this is being done.
Mitchell.
Mickey points out that there's a proc amp adjustment there towards the end. So it's been tweaked to look as good as it possibly can, and tweaking is always a good thing when you're grading video of any kind.
I think it's fair to say that just like diagnosing any signal chain, what you see is it works best when everything is right. When you start with a good signal from a good camera with good lighting, and then you pass it through good equipment that's not degrading it, and then you take care of the audio so it doesn't get degraded and it can be matched with things, and then you are careful with how you encode it and send it out to the web, and you make sure that you have enough bandwidth to get the full signal out there. And when everything works together in the entire signal chain, you get these results. I also think it's true that the modern devices, and I think I don't know that much about the Samsung or the other sides. I know about iPads only, but I think they have really pretty amazing picture capabilities on them now, considering that we used to have these huge, thick televisions with electron guns to make a decent picture in our living room. And now on a thing that's not much thicker than a piece of paper, we can get these beautiful pictures. Gives us a target that's really nice. Ken, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but I did want to make the note because Dennis reminded me, and I think it's a good reminder that we're almost, now we've got a couple extra questions in. We're running really low, and I wanted to make sure we didn't run out before the top of the hour, but it looks like things have taken care of themselves. So Kenneth, go ahead.
Well, I can talk. No, never mind. One of the things that I used to enjoy when I was a child were books called The Way Things Work, and I have always been intrigued by, right behind the content of whatever I was paying attention to, was the method of presentation. How do you do that? And sometimes that actually gets in the way of listening to what the other person was trying to convey. But that's on me, not on them, I suppose. So Tony's question is well stated and well deserved. And I think occasionally, if we were to use a phrase, loop back in block diagram function about how stuff gets from this microphone and that camera to people who are watching at the other end in increasingly complex terms, perhaps. Block diagrams, and then we'd go into a block and we get down to every button training. What happens if I do this, do that? That could be a fascinating series of presentations. And since in next hour we're supposed to be talking mostly about video things, perhaps that's a way of approaching this, an answer to a question like this.
Well said. Let's move on to the next question because we are getting close to the top of the hour here.
And that question comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. I noticed that using the traversal in the center of a Supersource makes it look like a moon landing. I think it would be better with some landmarks.
By the way, whoever thought up and put in the Tlaluk traversal is fabulous. That I don't know, some of you may not have noticed it if you've seen it, but there's usually a number there that indicates after the show at the tail end how far we virtually traveled to bring in all the people who are on the panelists bringing expertise to these discussions. And I just find that a fascinating thing. It's amazing to think of how this wonder of being able to get voices from all over the world in one place at one time talking about the same thing. Mitch, you had a comment.
Yeah, I agree that it is a wonderful device, but in the context of everybody wants to be an art director, I think it just needs some tweaking. We were playing around with just the other day, I believe it was Carl was showing us a version of the globe that looked more like the Indiana Jones version, where the Earth was a globe and the marks were jumping around. You could see the landmarks and things like that. I think that my problem with the traversal only is that most of the time I'm looking at it, it's already landed somewhere, and it looks like a petri dish when it's like that. So it just, I keep throwing these graphic references. I just think it needs to have a little more landmarky look so we can tell, yeah, that's Spain, that's UK, that's the US of A.
I've always felt comfortable when if I'm in a corporate meeting and I present something and there's a lot of discussion about, well, and you could do this and this could be better. I learned to take that as, oh, I succeeded, because the last thing you want is to throw something up in front of a bunch of people and have them go, yeah, okay. Not ask you anything. When people want to get involved and tune up your idea, that means that they've judged it to be worthy of their time to tune up. And I always feel really, really good about that when there's a robust discussion of anything I pitch to people. Dennis Champion Walker next.
Thanks. Yeah, in the spirit of explaining how the back end works, the traversal is actually Google Earth being driven by Isadora. So it just takes the locations from Meccana and then plays the animation of zooming from one place to another. It definitely does need some more work. I think Mitch is right. We need to see some edges of land masses so that we can work out a bit more easily where we are. If we're just looking at the solid land mass, it doesn't really give you much information to go on.
All right. Next one in our own chat has one that has created a lot of interest from the panel to discuss. So we're going to try to keep these short, guys. Let's go.
Yeah. And Chad is from Columbia, Missouri, and asks, what one piece of gear or technique raised your game the most?
John Prado.
There's no good answer to this. And so you need a good microphone, you need a good camera, you need lighting, you need a good machine, you need good internet. And so Roscoe will attest to this. He's got a whole giant list of gear, and you never finish.
Amen to that. Mitch?
Yeah, John is right on target. I'll start because it's my voice a lot of times. My U87 was my first big purchase, and I really know how to work that microphone, so it really upped my game and made my radio voice much more natural.
Roscoe Jones.
I'd say DV and Firewire was the biggest change. It took the analog world and suddenly put it in a digital realm that was affordable. That was the big thing. I'm always the term butts and seats for education. The more students you can put in front of something or more workstations you can put together oftentimes determines how much education takes place, sadly. But it was affordable, and it did radically change the fact that you could make a digital copy or a physical copy from deck to deck, and it was no generational loss, which people who haven't been through analog don't understand.
That what you're describing changed my entire life. Sky Gleason.
I remember that as well, Roscoe. But this is what changed for me. I started out with the Skull Candies, and now I'm on the MV7. And I'm grateful for both because I got to meet you people. But I'm hearing that this has a better sound to it. And so that's one of the big ones that changed for me.
And Tony, real quick.
It's not a fair question. And the reason why it's not a fair question, in my case, fiber. PR40, ATEM Mini, teleprompter, Mac Mini M1, and I can go on and on and on.
Excellent answer. Let's move to the next question real quick.
And that comes from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. I very much appreciate the question and timestamps in the YouTube video. Is there a public database of all of the questions over the office hours time and corresponding links? Would this be helpful to viewers for past reference?
And Dennis, since you're on, you had your hand raised, so let's get your answer.
Yes, so there isn't a database as such currently, and I know Alex has in the past talked about creating one. So that is, I think, something that we are working towards eventually. Currently, though, you can access all of the previous questions in Discord. There is a channel there in Discord which itemizes all of the questions that were asked each day on the show.
And Mitch, you want to make a real quick comment, and Kenneth as well? Mitch?
Yeah, Jonas was showing us some search mechanism that transcribes all the YouTube, and you go in and you narrow your search to office hours, and then you just type in a keyword, and it was kind of funny because he put dagnabbits in there, and it just showed an endless montage of Alex going, dagnabbit, dagnabbit, dagnabbits. It was pretty
Okay. We have one more. I know there are a couple other hands raised, but let's get to Douglas's last question, see if we can deal with it a little bit and be close to on time when we make the switch here. So, Douglas? Or
Yep.
Dennis.
Dennis, even. Yeah. Douglas Carmichael says CBS Sports is working with exceptional minds to recruit those on the autism spectrum in their media asset management department. Should we, as an industry, partner with those that work with said populations to help solve our crewing shortages?
I would hope that we've learned that. I mean, people, and I think the term is now neurodivergent, but whatever it is, there are so many people, and that spectrum is so wide that the old style thinking, and this is my personal opinion, the old style thinking of you're diagnosed with this, which means you are that, seems so out of date now. And we're finding so much intelligence, capability in people that may not present exactly as you have seen before, that it would be a tragedy to lose those contributions to society. So I'm hoping that as technology continues to improve, that companies like that, and I've heard of them and Google, and there's all sorts of companies who are exploring this population as an important resource for moving society forward as we go along. And I hope that gets nothing but bigger. All right, it's time here. We're at the top of the hour, so that means it's time to move into our second hour discussion. Today, we are going to be looking at the video side of what we talk about here on office hours. And if you missed the discussion about this before, we're not really in this particular second hour going to talk about what you want us to question and answer for video topics. We're more talking about how we should, the kinds of topics, the kinds of ideas, the kinds of shows that you would like to see us mount in the coming year in the area of video. So anybody can raise their hands and get in there. And Dennis Champion Walker has the first hand up here in the internal panel discussion.
So, we talked about it a little bit in the first hour. I think discussing the mechanisms that drive office hours itself is a fruitful area because, as was mentioned, not only is it instructing people on how these things work specifically for this, but it's also sort of opening up how these things, the sort of production process works in general.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we only have one question up on the topic, so if we don't have others this is going to be an extraordinarily short hour. Does anybody else on the panel have any? Oh, no, here we go. Kenneth Jones has some thoughts on this.
I'm always willing to have a thought on something or other. One of the things that we do pretty well around here, it seems, is produce our own programs using equipment that we use professionally. I'm not in that camp. And as a result, my interest also includes how to get the most with the least. And if we're talking in the realm of Zoom fatigue, which has been a concept we've discussed recently, sometimes ad nauseum, I think perhaps some time could be profitably spent by explaining how to get the best possible results with the least possible expense. This concept of buy once, cry once is well understood here. But also, if you can buy once and not cry at all, maybe just a little tear off, the corner of one eye would be okay. But how to do the most with the least seems to be, to me, a viable topic in this concept.
That resonates with me. I talk occasionally about the delta between this product and that product, and the question is it worth 4 times the cost to get from 90 to 95% perfection? And, for some it is, and that's a perfectly rational way to do it. But we are seeing, and we had this discussion about things like microphones and things like small cameras and things like that have so technologically advanced that I am well out of the days when I was starting when you needed $40,000 in the Betacam era to get a field capable camera where you could do work that could go on broadcast well. And I can certainly easily do that with my phone now. So we've seen, orders of magnitude change in what is required to make these things happen. And I don't think that's going to slow down. I think that's going to accelerate and continue to improve. John Preto wanted to weigh in.
So are we talking about possible second hours for video sections? Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And topics.
I think we did a brief overview of scopes, reading waveform monitors and vector scopes. And I think that would be super useful. A lot of people kind of know their way around, but I don't think we've never done a real deep dive on utilization of scopes. Would be great.
Yeah, when I thought I was going to be working on Thursdays on this stuff, I did a whole series of topics, and one of my first ones up at the top, because it's always gotten so much traction, was color correction, and I don't think you can do that without scopes. So I don't know whether those are two separate ones, or we bring somebody like Charles in to help us understand even more. And I also understand that there's base grading, the kind of stuff that almost every editor has to do as you get footage over the transom into your workflow or the internet into your workflow, and you have to judge that footage and then get it to at least an acceptable starting place, versus the looks grading and the things that someone like Charles, who has extraordinary tools and color sense, enables to make something look absolutely stellar. I think both of those things have value to our audience, and this is your chance as the audience to weigh in on what you think might be the right kind of approaches. Roscoe, let's move to Roscoe.
Well, I'm going to join Kenneth and say, let's stay down with the Joneses, because it's always wonderful to know what the products are that are affordable that actually provide a valuable function to the end user. But at the same time, the breadth of this group here is just incredible. I think we need to maybe get down to that level, because it's practical. It's what, the person can go out and order on Amazon and be happy with the next day, and doesn't take a 3-day seminar just to figure out how to turn on the waveform monitor or the function and use it properly. But at the same time, we need to challenge people to come up to the top and do the things that are quite sophisticated and allow this program to be as good as it is, because that is providing vision, destination, providing goals for that individual. It says, yeah, you can do it here, but let's hope that that will also teach you how to do the high-end tools.
Well, that makes sense to me too, because now even on the lowest of the low-end ATEMs, on the minis, which is just a couple of $100, you can get one for probably 150 used now, maybe a little more than that. But it has color module stuff in its software back there, and so you can open up, colorimetry changing things, throw a set of scopes up, and make changes that only high-end systems would have allowed. You would have needed a dedicated shader to do these kinds of things, and now it's sitting there in a device you might have bought for a few bucks just to switch with. And so why shouldn't you have access to the knowledge of how to appropriately use it to get what you want done? Tony Mobley has some thoughts.
I want to say I echo everything that Kenneth and Roscoe just said about bridging the gap. One of the things that I think that we need to consider as a group is that at the beginning of the pandemic, the power of office hours was in full stream in terms of helping educators figure out how to do instruction. And as things got better, there was sort of a tendency not to really talk about the hardware and production kinds of elements. And what I would say is that because the future is so unpredictable, that those who have the production technology keep their hands in a way for the teachers moving forward to be able to bridge that gap if needed in the future. Because let's be honest, that there, I don't want to be political, but there are still, people are still getting sick. And we don't know what is going to happen in the fall and winter. And all I'm saying is that we have always been, as a group, cutting edge. And so I'm just encouraging us to keep that in mind as we move forward. Maybe there is a way in which cloud production can be utilized in the education arena. Those are, I'm just throwing that out. And so all I'm saying is, let's not forget supporting the educators moving forward in terms of video production, if you will.
Yeah, I think that resonates with me too. Some of my most enjoyable sessions on office hours in the early days is when I dropped into Saturdays and the education hours. And yeah, it's a very important constituency. And as right now we're in the world. I'm sitting in San Diego and somebody in Buenos Aires and concurrently in Vladivostok can probably watch me talk. Now, I apologize to both of those people if I don't say anything interesting, but that capability for someone to reach out from almost anywhere to touch a lot of people means that if you do have particular expertise, if you do have particular thinking or experience in something that is valuable to a cadre of people, you can put it out there and help those people not have to make all the little mistakes that you made along the way to that expertise. And that's going to accelerate learning and do well, I think, for society. It looks like that takes care of our initial thing. So we've got a few questions here. Let's go to Brandon Buttram next. I'm sorry, I'm falling back into my habits. This is Dennis's role today. Go ahead, Dennis.
Thanks, Bill. Brandon Buttram in Indianapolis, Indiana says, I would like to see if we could bring in someone in from a 24-hour news organization to give us an insight as to how they manage video contribution from all over the world 24 hours a day.
That is a fascinating topic. I would be equally interested in how you manage abundance. That's part of it, because I've been in near where I lived in Scottsdale, up at the Scottsdale Air Park. There used to be a news aggregator that brought in the entire Western United States feeds, and they would make it available to all the TV stations, local TV stations in the country. And they had just an amazing stream. They reached me at one point because they needed some Final Cut stuff, and it was just like, wow. Look at all these feeds. Look at all these reporters out in the field from all over the Western United States doing all of these stories. And then those were fed back to a central repository. And I would imagine that a 24-hour news organization is hooked into multiple visual, story-oriented databases like that. How do you even know where to go to pick the next story? Yeah, fascinating thing. Roscoe, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, we're not supposed to answer the questions, but just move on. But if you look at the feeds from ABC in New York, Chicago, and LA, you'll see how many of those feeds actually are redundant to those three. So they do. They go into a big database, and they do get picked from even in the various. Some stories are considered national, and some stories are considered local. But I think talking to an editor, just how they deal with all the content that they come in, I think that might be quite practical for us, because I think that's a fascinating individual. I don't know any news editors currently, but I'm sure if we reach out, we might be able to pull one in.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And it's an industry out there, certainly. Next question.
Mickey Makachaw from Manila in the Philippines says, the nice thing about standards is that you have so many to choose from. A deep dive into standards and breaking down what each pertain to might be good. Something along the lines of explaining that 4K does not mean UHD or 2160p.
Yeah, I agree with your fact that, standards is a funny term because there's so many of them and they continue to expand. I mean, back in the broadcast days, we actually had it easy because everybody knew that every TV station, every tape machine adhered to the NTSC standard in America and the PAL and CCAM standards in other parts of the world. So you had a target that was the same for everybody. If your video was basically 640 by 480, 720 by 480, if you were working digitally, you were good to go and you didn't have a problem. Well, look at the web now. I mean, vertical, horizontal, square, who knows what this thing is going to be. And who knows what kind of monitor the person on the other end of that signal is going to require. I do some broadcast work in terms of commercial production and distribution, and I will tell you, I'm still seeing changes out in delivery specifications as more and more of the, I'm going to say broadcast outlets, and I'm not even broadcast because it could be web. I mean, I do a whole pass for broadcast, and I understand the broadcast standards, and I'm pretty good with that. But then you get to these over-the-top distributors like Hulu or whatever, and you're putting an ad on there, and that ad is coming from a regional ad buy content distribution network as opposed to a national one, and the standards are different. And I spend most of my time on those months where I have to do a big broadcast spot distribution from a client, just trying to say, where are you guys now? Where are you today? I know, I had a recipe for where you were 3 months ago, but for this campaign, where are you now? And it's surprising how many of them change over that short a period of time. So yeah, there's a lot to be discussed there about the changing world of standards. Roscoe wants to say something.
Well, I just think I was trying to figure out what standards could this group, what could we actually present on that's video related, obviously, or maybe audio related. But this group, we've had an impact on Zoom. Certainly, we saw Andy come up through, and he's creating new standards. Zoom will become these technologies that he's implementing into Zoom will probably become standards by which other people have to be educated and trained on. And certainly, as came in earlier in the first hour, the OH 2.0, just what we're doing there is kind of a standard right now, and it's quite interesting what they're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're in the midst of change in this area, and that's what I'm experiencing in my professional career in these deliveries. Everything is changing out there, and what I know about this month may not be the same thing that I have to do in 3 months. And learning the language of things like delivery formats and things like that might be a very good, or at least exposing people to the rudimentary parts of that might be a really valuable thing. So if you want those kind of things, put in a vote for it. Next question.
Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington says, Alex did 4 audio subjects a month: synthesizer, capture, mixing, and music, and then a wild card 5th Tuesday. What subjects would you see video version of this be?
Sky Gleason has some thoughts.
Tom and I are making notes and capturing all of this, scribing all of this information so that we can start collating people's interest. And I think this is a template, since we've got at least 4 Tuesdays a month currently, and occasionally a 5th. That was the construct of what we're doing today, is with regards to thinking about video on, is it Tuesday? Sorry, Thursday, the other T in the week. And consequently, I was going to throw out the idea of the bigger concept of capture, output, playback, and then, as Bill just said, video standards. Maybe that'd be a good one for a 5th Tuesday somewhere in the year. So anyway, that's what I guess I'm trying to understand and scribe out, and getting the producers excited. Let's talk about this part of the video, and then we'll really go deep dive throughout the year.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Dennis, and then Roscoe. Dennis?
Yeah, I think one category that you missed from that would be editing. So in terms of either post-production or doing it live on a stream, those could be fruitful areas to look at.
Absolutely. Roscoe?
I was going to go with lens, and then some sort of mixing, or maybe the storage standard, and then live, and then post.
Interesting. Okay. I used to teach, I used to have a seminar that I used to do where I talked to beginning video makers about the 5, what I consider to be the 5 primary stages of, and it was a very short-handy thing. The first one was pre-production, and that's all the things you had to do before you went out and tried to capture content. And that is a pretty big area when you think about it. I mean, location scouting, there's just tons of things that go into making a video that you have to get organized. equipment, how are you going to source your equipment, how are you going to source crews, how are you going to get everybody on the same page to show up at the same time. Script writing is a huge part of that. That's all goes into the video production process. And then the three, what I kind of considered physics things, which was sound recording, which we had to do audio for video, which is similar to what regular audio production is, but also dissimilar in some ways. Some of the techniques that you would use in mixing an album have almost nothing to do with how audio for video is captured and presented along. Lighting, of course. I'm trying to remember the third one. So sound, lighting, and videography and camera work. That process of actually recording, and that can do lenses and filters and the motion of a camera. What does that mean to you? What are you saying to the audience when you decide to pan right as opposed to leaving the shot stable? And then post-production was my last of those five, and you can see how broad a topic post-production is. Everything from the editing, but there's also distribution, encoding, working with the modern networks so that you understand how to get your piece that you've created out to the public. So I think there's a lot of approaches to this, and I'm really happy that we're getting ideas on all of them. I don't think there's ever one thing. The idea of making a video and sending it out is a complicated process. It can be simple. I mean, and there are tools that make it more simple now than it ever has been before. But I do think a lot of people who say, I've watched something on YouTube and I think I could do that, and they get into shooting and they don't, get satisfying results in how their video looks or how it sounds, or they're having trouble encoding it to get up. And then
so
once they get it up,
once a week on Thursday, if we specifically talk about all of your big combination of things about video, what would the 4 things a month you would like to talk about with regards to video of that big combination of stuff?
Well, that's why I think specific things like when I was doing my little list thinking of Thursdays in the future, I started with video color correction because I thought that was interesting and there's a lot of questions about it. But I had noted video settings, which is just how do you set up a camera to get it right. Outdoor light modifiers. I wanted to do something for field production. There's the business side of things like music videos or corporate video or something like that. I would think that would be interesting for people who are interested in those kind of things. Then there's always, hey, what are the current cameras and what are people using? I just think there's a lot of topics. And so I'm not sure whether for specific, here's my question for you guys and for the audience at large. If we theme the first Thursday is going to be about this, are we missing too much by making us focus on whatever that first theme is? And then the same thing for the second, third, and fourth. Does it allow us to be more general and respond to what the audience wants to know more if we leave more of them open? Or should we have these themes? And is that reductive or expansive in terms of how we talk about these things? And I'm not answering those.
Again, I think Alex's request was he's realizing he's got a lot on his plate. Mm-hmm. And so he's trying to become more of a syllabus structure so that we can bring in specialists in the future in those categories. This is how I'm interpreting what we're doing today is what are those subjects and categories? We don't know where these building blocks are going to go or who's going to be talking about them. But I love that you talked about, outdoor lighting. It's like, oh yeah, it's completely different than indoor. Yeah. And then power.
Is the third Thursday lighting? Do we just make that, we're gonna talk about shooting indoors, shooting outdoors, shooting, what are the lights? How do you modify them? All of that. It's a big subject all by itself. Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by the questions. So thank you. We're getting a good group of questions here, and I appreciate it. So let's keep going through what our audience wants to hear via their questions.
And the next is from Laura Thompson in Beaumont, Texas. Would audio description for video go into the audio or the video topic?
Excellent point. Here's Roscoe Jones to address it.
I definitely think it goes in the video topic, just because you have to have video in order to describe it. So there has to be a video element involved. You can have audio and you can be very descriptive, but audio without video is still good radio.
There you go. Okay. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, video transport technologies and platforms, NetInsight Nimbra, for example.
Yeah, that's the whole back end. And I always felt bad about in my 5 topic overview outline, I always felt bad about doing something as huge as editing, post-production, distribution, and trying to do it in one bucket, because it seemed like there was so much technical detail. And that is one of the areas where it's increasing more than ever, because we have all these platforms. I mean, how do you prepare a video chain to insert stuff into Facebook Live? Yeah, there's so many subtopics of this. Now, also remember that there's nothing wrong with trying to send people to Thursdays as a video-centric thing, and allowing the questions, the general questions in the beginning, to kind of skew more video. So you can, it's not that if we don't have a theme for it, you can't ask it or it won't get answered. I think quite the opposite. I think one of the smart things about Alex's design here is that general question answer means that you can ask anything at any time on any of these topics. And if other people think that that's a good question, it will get voted up and we'll deal with it. So that it provides a release valve. We don't have to do everything via this plan, but interesting stuff. Next question.
Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California in the USA says, what about a segment that takes a list of the gear used in a broadcast and match it with usable replacement gear for those who don't have a broadcast budget?
And Sky wants to weigh in on this.
I love that because, again, I came from broadcast, and so a lot of my challenge is giving up the big, heavy iron, because technology has moved so quickly and the price point has come down so far that everybody now has a lot better gear than I had when I got into the industry. So how would you well, Ken, I think Ken's going to define this better for me.
Ken?
Well, I'm not sure I can define it, but we all have this concept that has been discussed around here for weeks now about gear acquisition syndrome. And it is the case that it's very easy for me to take $10,000 and fill a room full of equipment over here. But then how do I know what I bought is the correct one? And how could I do it for $2,000 or even less than that, perhaps? I think is an excellent topic that we need to devote a considerable amount of time on. Discussion of the processes is absolutely a requirement. And then finding the best tools that do that job, I think, would be a marvelous use of our time. Remembering that one of the goals of this program is distribution to millions of people. And while we might have several 100,000 people who are our target audience who already are competent, highly competent in this regard, we probably have 10 to 100 times more of that available to us who have fewer clues about how all this happens. And our ability as teachers becomes paramount, I think, if we want to expand this market.
Roscoe Jones.
The other great thing we do is we say, well, for your application, and that's the key, for your application, this piece of gear might be by when it goes down, then your whole program's off the air, or you're not going to reach your audience, that kind of stuff. So I think that's really a great subject for that reason too. I'm always reminded of an episode of MASH where they suddenly said, MASH stands for Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. And so they demanded that they all move like across the road. You will learn a lot about what gear is necessary and what gear is important when you actually have to move it from point A to point B, as I watched Noah do incredibly well at the NAMM and Cinegear show.
Yeah. And Roscoe, I did see what looked like some Wi-Fi type anomalies in your signal. So I don't know if you've switched to Wi-Fi, but just be aware of it. We still heard everything you said there. Let's move on to the next question.
And that comes from Mickey Makachaw in Manila in the Philippines. A deep discussion on the science of gripology and how having good grip and electric departments is crucial to keeping a site safe.
Sky is going to start us out on
I'm
this.
just going to, again, reassure Mickey that Tom and I are both scraping these notes for, again, Alex, who will be reading these, but also anybody else that is going to be participating in helping to organize, coordinate, manage these ideas and listening to Bill's point. Who is the audience? What do you want them to do? What do they want to hear? So these are preliminary conversations. And Mickey, I love the gripology of this. And then the electrical department, I'm still confused between volts and hertz. I should know more.
So should we all. It's a complicated thing. I agree with Mickey 100%. Gripology is really important. And he brings up an excellent point here in keeping the set safe. I mean, that is the reason that I think in part we have all these specialist tools. I mean, there's a difference between a Cardellini clamp and a Mayfer clamp, is that somebody at some point said, that's not good enough. I need a wider jaw or something like that to ensure that this heavier fixture isn't going to come loose and land on somebody below it. And we have this tendency now to think gear does get smaller and smaller and lighter. And so you don't maybe need the big clamp on the small camera. But if your goal is to build your business so that instead of doing small projects in your backyard, you're doing medium-sized projects in a corporate environment, at some point you have to make that mental thing, are these small clamps and small tools and lighter weight things good enough? Or is it time for me to get rid of all the plastic zip ties that are safetying my lights and move to actual cable clips that are designed for safety up there? That's another level of the production industry that you should be aware of. Tom Ferguson?
Well, and as Mickey said, the safety on the set. If you don't know your single phase from your three phase and you don't recognize that connector, you just better back slowly away from the connector.
I was taught to lick the cable. Is that not right, Tom?
No, that only works with 9 volts.
That's not it.
That's not it. Okay, see, we need this class. We need this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's doing a great service to the audience as people learn from this show and come up, talk constantly about safety. So Mickey's point is well taken. Let's move on to the next one.
Lenny Nelson from San Antonio, Texas says lecture capture products and services like Panopto and Kaltura would be interesting to see how they automate scheduling and distribution.
That's an interesting. I hadn't heard about either of these. So you brought something to the table, Lenny, that I didn't know about, and I would be fascinated to listen in or help with a discussion of that. Roscoe, you had some thoughts?
Oh, yeah. It's really about organization in the background. I mean, it would be, in my mind, it would fall under storage because it's before you're going to go to post-production. They're designed to be systems that you really don't need any post on. They capture it, they categorize it, they make it available, they distribute it to students. If you're enrolled in 442 science, then you get you get access to the 442 lectures.
Cool. Sounds like a great system that'd be a boon for anybody who's doing training of any kind. So yeah, great suggestion. Next question.
John Preto from Las Vegas says, maybe good to get an overview of SMPTE to 2110 resolutions, frame rates, bandwidth requirements, protocols, etc.
Yeah, the engineering side of both the video and audio capture things, but also the internet, because this is so inexplicably intertwined. Everything is tied up. I was of the generation that we learned when cameras were fed down BNC coax cables to a switcher, and I'll never forget, it was probably, I guess it's getting close to 8 or 9 years ago that I got into my first set where everything was video over IP, and it was a learning process to come to that. Nowadays, I don't think there's any going back. Video and computer passing of signals is just completely inexorably tied together, and we all need to be increasingly aware of IP-based and internet protocol stuff. It's just critical. John Preto, wanted to say something about this?
The 2110, I think it's subsection 10 or -20, defines uncompressed video, and the bandwidth requirements are just out of this world. And you're going to end up spending more on IP infrastructure than you will on your audio video gear. And so it's just really interesting. I'm trying to look up what the requirements were, but one stream was over a gigabit per second.
Yeah, and that gets us into naturally a discussion of codecs and what the current state of the art is. We've known, H.264 as a mezzanine codec and trying to edit with it, and then H.265 hovered around, and there's all those things having to do with compressing a video signal from its organic, natural bigness into something that can be distributed around and can be worked with by individuals on laptops and things like that. That's always, I think, a really positive, open subject. How are people doing this? How are they succeeding? What tools are they using? And what works best? Roscoe Jones wants to weigh in too.
Well, if nothing else, we can go to trade shows and see how many booths are saying now working with SMPTE 2110, because that's a big indicator. These are standards, kind of like Mickey brought up, that, people have to agree to use that standard. And when you start to see companies, implementing it between each other, then you really know you have something catching fire.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Next question.
And that comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. I'd love to see a survey of software versus hardware switching and encoding options and demonstrations of the differences between various workflows.
Sky.
I just wanted to reassure Chad that we're going to take a survey to see if your question makes it into the questions. So
meta surveys.
Meta surveys. No, I think the survey concept is again a new tool that we have available to us. And these are the kind of questions that I think today is all about. So thank you, Chad. And so you've inspired me about surveys, but yes, who's doing what and how, what's the evolution of hardware versus software, best case, and affordability. These are all things that we've got a wide variety of people and economy that's listening into these conversations the second hours.
Absolutely. Roscoe Jones?
It's not really a versus either. It's more of a blend. Who's blending more hardware or less software? I see more and more people, the hybrid version. We talk about hybrid here as in, is it a virtual or a real presentation? But I think we're also seeing a lot of hybrid as far as between software, hardware being implemented.
Absolutely. Let's go to the next question.
Gordon Lake from Los Angeles, California says, can you get a guest on from one of the cable news networks to do a walkthrough of what it takes to do a show or a day's worth of shows with some behind the scenes images?
Possibly. One of the things about everybody I've known who works in network or cable news at that level, they're just crazy, insane busy. I have a friend who was a producer of the morning show for the ABC affiliate in my town, and she got up at 3 o'clock in the morning every single day, some days 2 o'clock in the morning, and worked like crazy until she got off at like 11 or 12, mostly sometimes 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I've never seen somebody who was more overscheduled as she was working on, as a producer, bringing a constant flow of guests into the shows. So hopefully we might have a contact. We got a lot of people in our system, and the 6 degrees of separation idea, maybe somebody knows of somebody who knows somebody who could get us behind the scenes at that. It'd be fascinating to see. Roscoe had a thought.
Beautiful coverage of like the Tokyo Olympics we got. We had an incredible behind the scenes of F1. So stick around, because it can't always be scheduled. Sometimes because of corporate policies, the person can't appear on another show that's going to be recorded, but we've gotten some amazing presentations. So I would think, yes, definitely we'll do this, but it may not always be in a scheduled format.
There you go. That makes sense. We have to be agile enough to take as we can when somebody is available or something comes up. Let's move to the next question,
which comes from Kenneth Jones in Seattle, Washington. Audio might be subordinate to video, but both give way to business development. Maybe a fifth week topic could be how to do this as a business.
I think every time we've had business discussions about how to actually turn your passions into some sort of profit that will sustain your interest in the passion, we've had a lot of uptake about that idea, because I think a lot of people would love to work in this full-time and supplant, or even part-time. Dennis, you had some thoughts on this?
I would question whether audio is subordinate to video. I would say it's actually a higher priority. If you don't have any audio, you don't have a show. If you don't have video, you can still do something.
I support that 100%. In fact, my opening gag in all the time, I was a columnist for Video Maker magazine for a lot, and I went around and did a lot of lectures on it. Every one where I had an audio component to it, I used to challenge the audience. I would say, I want everybody to listen for a second, and I would go, and I said, now look around you, make sure you're safe. Now close your eyes, and I'm going to say something. Hi, my name is Bill Davis, and I've been doing this work for like 15 years. And then I just challenged them with this question: what did you get more information from? Visual without the audio, or audio without the visual? And I tried to get them to understand that most of the heavy lifting in any presentation, even video presentations, is done by your soundtrack, not necessarily the visual. Sure, that will attract attention, but I'm talking about the actual content distribution. Audio, I would agree with you, is actually more fundamental and needs at least as much, if not substantially more attention than your video signal. Let's move on.
And Douglas Carmichael has a very terse comment, media asset management.
Yeah, that's a big subject. And I think it's going to always be increasingly important because there's more media asset generators in our life. I remember some years ago, 5 or 6, maybe more than that, 7 or 8 years ago, I produced a 14 camera shoot because Final Cut had just come out and they had a new multicam facility. So I guess maybe it was 10 years ago now. And so I got a whole bunch of the photographers in my area together and we did a 14 camera shoot. And I realized how important media management is when you have more and more cameras. And at the time, I remember dreaming about it. And I think, well, what's going to happen someday when there's a concert and something happens? Let's hope it's not a disaster, but something, very newsworthy happens. And somebody's going to get up and say, I want footage of this. Who's going to send it in? And you're going to suddenly get 30,000 clips because everybody was holding their phone up. And how do you even manage that kind of a shoot if you have that much content to go through? Cameras are so inexpensive now, and they're so good for the price you pay for them, that we are seeing more and more views of more and more things. And media asset management, just if nothing else, just tagging and having a cohesive strategy for following a piece of content through and understanding where it fits in your workflow and into the edit and how it's going to get whatever, what's the right word for it? How priority it needs in you as an editor, bringing that into the piece because you actually saw that it was there, as opposed to it was on camera 138 and you never got around to looking at it. These are increasingly important things as things get global and distributed. I'm talking too much about this. Let's go to Roscoe and Sky for thoughts.
Well, Walter Murch would say that's why you still need to do linear editing so that you see all those other images go by as you're searching for the image you want. That's one of his points of why he still liked linear editing over nonlinear. But real quick, camera to cloud is in its infancy, and it's going to just keep growing. And I think we'd be a great team to just keep analyzing. And even things like Stream Voodoo that we got to beta test at Cinegear, it worked at NAMM. Noah was out there taking some really good pictures on just an iPhone. So we're really just starting on some of these technologies that are great.
Absolutely. Sky?
Yeah, Douglas, you inspired me with regards to this concept, the meta as information that Bill was talking about, the ID and tagging of things, and then consequently the AI of that, because there are complete films that are being artificially created because the metadata is so accurate. And so you do circle takes during the event, and the machine says, "Oh, I need to put this thing in that slot," and so. This is a critical part of our conversation that has to do with video and imagery.
Absolutely. And just, big data overload and how do you manage it? It's getting more and more critical. Next question.
And that comes from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Interest on new live streaming possibilities for the next breed of stringers. I enjoyed watching Shot in the Dark several years ago when news gathering stringers chased, shot, edited, and distributed to news sources clips, all from a car.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I don't think I ever saw that, but I'm going to put it on my to-be watched list. You have all these people with phones out there, and at some point, if they have 5G coming up in the future, they're going to be able to be gone to live, one would assume, after, maybe a few more years of working out the details of that. So you have the same thing that we were just talking about in terms of a concert crowd where you get submissions of thousands of phone files that you have to go through. At some point, somebody in a control room has the potential to have 100 live feeds coming from people with cell phones all around some breaking news item. And how do you manage that? It's not going to be a simple thing. Roscoe has some thoughts about that.
I just think it'd be amazing if someone could build like a production studio in like a Tesla, and then drive around or something like that. That'd be really
cool. Who would do
to
that?
see if,
that would be that's insane. We're teasing, of course, because our own 1F Jeff did exactly that for the rocket launch. Let's go on to the next question.
Laura Thompson has the next question from Beaumont, Texas. Would we want to add framing for things like American Sign Language or captioning best practices into the discussion?
Absolutely. I think, well, you know, this is one of the things I'm a little sad that there is a migration from broadcast to video for the web in this one area. And that is with broadcast, there was a requirement for closed captioning because this was a government ticket that you had to get to be able to broadcast. You had to keep your broadcast license. They could mandate things that maybe didn't provide the same level of profit, but that was good for the community. I note that there are market forces that are pushing us back to that. I'm getting more and more requests from clients to caption things. Some of my clients, some people, some of them go, no, we're just putting this on the web. It doesn't need to be captioned. And I try to push back as much as I can about that. But the statistics are saying that a lot of people are watching streams, particularly as they are going through their social media feeds and things like that. And the addition of caption material can help them understand what they are scrolling by and maybe stop and be more sticky as to that concept and get you more eyeballs. So hopefully those additional things for the differently abled community, continue to be a priority. And I guess all of us as producers have to make it so. Roscoe, you had some thoughts on this?
Most everything that's produced or for the education community has a requirement that there will be a closed captioning element built in, whether it's over YouTube, whether it's over a proprietary delivery mechanism, there must be some sort of closed captioning.
Right. And if you learn these things, you can also do second language and things like that and maybe make your content more universally acceptable. That if you have that thing built into your workflow, then suddenly if they need it in a different language for a different market, you get extra sales out of it. That would be the hope anyway. Sky Gleason?
I did notice that a certain software company here in Redmond, Washington is very intentional about reaching out to this audience. And it requires resources. So Laura, that I know that you have those skills, abilities, maybe not the time, but I don't think the question is, should it be done? I think the question is, it has to be a part of the intent. And I love that you're bringing that into the question, just as Douglas brings in other perspectives, that it's like, these are languages, constructs, concepts that are possible now because the equipment's not the limiting factor, not the barrier to entry. So I'm writing these down. Let's figure out when and how to talk about this stuff.
I also think there's a component of it where I didn't realize how easy it could be. I mean, 15 years ago, it was a complex process to get closed captioning done.
Easy is still relative. It is. But, once you crack the code on it, and it maybe takes a week of your time to investigate and understand,
that you can, from most of these NLEs, I know Premiere and Final Cut, and I would assume Avid does it, you can literally send your audio out, get it auto-translated into caption files, bring them in, and then it just takes a little bit of time to go through, because they're all in time with the speech on the video, to go through to clean them up and make sure that they're understandable, because any speech to text translation is going to have an error rate. But it is not 2 weeks worth of work and a lot of money, and you have to send it out to an expert set to get this done. And if more people knew that, I think maybe they could be convinced that, hey, there's no reason not to caption everything you do. It is such an easy few clicks things once you understand how to do it, that there's no reason not to serve that audience too. Just it's so much easier now than it used to be. Next one up.
James Babbitt from San Diego, California says, could Office Hours have a show about producing high-quality videos for YouTube, editing, graphics, subtitles, etc.? Maybe Rennie Ritchie could be a second-hour guest.
That would be fabulous. That is where the eyeballs have migrated. There are more people watching content on the social media sites than there ever were on broadcast. And I think this is something we should lean into as much as possible. So someone like Renee or Justine or Jonathan, and I'm sure there are other people working that I don't know about because I don't spend that much time watching those kind of programs. But that's always, I think you never go wrong if you're trying to lean into trends that you can clearly see are supplanting old production processes. So I'm all for it. Next one.
Lenny Nelson from San Antonio, Texas says, I may have some connections, wink, if you all would like to spend some time with NDI product managers.
Yeah, I would think NDI is one of the enabling technologies that gets talked about a lot. So I know Alex, I think Alex said a few days ago that the issue really is it just takes time for him to make the connection, to talk about what the show is, to make sure they understand. And he does have some standards. And I think they've served us really well, particularly in terms of not wanting just product marketing people as much as product engineering people, because the nature of this group is we want to investigate below the surface. We're not just there to say, here's the shiny new thing and tell us what's in the brochure, because we can all see the brochure. But intelligent questioning by our audience of these experts is really what makes this show what it is and so special. So I know he wants to continue in that direction. Sky, your thoughts?
I'm interpreting the wink, Lenny, that you might be the person that that is the expert in this field. If that's the case, either way, or if you know someone, either way, if you're familiar with Discord in this community, there's a specific channel called Second Hour, I believe. And I believe that's one of the real go-tos that Alex goes to. And
Second Hour Suggestions.
Keep going, Dennis. Where is it?
Yeah, Second Hour Suggestions.
That's the hashtag? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I was just taught the other day, you can do Command K and type in what Dennis just said, and it shows up on Discord, a way to find things in Discord. So yeah, put that offering to the community there, and let's see about bringing that information into the community.
John Preto.
Wink, wink. We know who Lenny is. If you reach out to Alex, I'm sure we can get you. We'd love to have you. And go. A lot of us use NDI in the office hours community, so we'd love to have you.
Yeah, I think we're going to increasingly find people are interested in coming on to talk to our group about that. I just look at the trajectory of Andy Carluccio's thing. You know, he was doing something in New York, and we got to know him, and he got to know us, and he had some skills, and he and Alex resonated together, and so they started talking, and then he was instrumental in Office Hours 2.0, and then the next thing you know, kind of that gets on Zoom's radar, and then he's suddenly has a much, much, much bigger playground to apply his estimable skills to. And
I just looked up Lenny on LinkedIn. Oh yeah.
So see, that's it. I didn't know your skill set, but now I'm hearing from people whose opinions I respect that, yeah, let's get him. So that's all it takes is the spark that starts these things. Let's move on.
Philip Shane from New York, says, another suggestion for show topics is to center them on different kinds of shows. Ideas include producing music videos, tutorial videos, local news reports, or long-form documentaries, which happens to be my specialty.
I would love programs on each of those subsets, and it's just the process of trying to figure out, and here's one of the things. We like in our second hours to have a focusable guest who knows these things. So if you want to hear something about, let's say, tutorial videos, and you have connections with somebody who has been wildly successful and has built an audience on making really excellent tutorial videos, find ways to connect them. And Discord is probably the best way to do that, as you've just heard. Put in a suggestion for a guest, the why you think they would be a good guest. If there's contact information, Alex will work with you to track those down, or whoever is doing that. I mean, we're doing kind of different days here. And so if it turns out to be a Thursday thing, whoever you have to contact, suggest that. We're always looking for content, and absolutely each of those could make a fascinating show, and I'm sure there would be an audience for that subset of the overall video idea. Roscoe?
Well, I was also going to say, I'm going to make a pitch. Join the panel, because we need perspective. We need different people that come from different points of view. We may talk about storage, and you may have a completely different perspective that really registers, and we all go, oh, didn't think of it that way. So please feel free to just join us here also.
And how would they do that, Dennis? How would they join the panel?
I would suggest they message Chad on Discord.
There you go. Chad Lafarge. Just look for it on any of our links, and you should be able to track down Chad and send him a note. Let's move on.
Tom Ferguson from Phoenix, Arizona says, we have defined major topics of audio, graphics, and video. Where do we add not so minor subjects such as IT and network design?
Whoops, I just punched the wrong button and I mistake. There we go. Now it's here. Roscoe Jones wants to go in for this.
Well, certain things like IT and network design are in all of those areas. So I think there's times to focus on it specifically, but hopefully we include it in all of those subject areas as we discuss them also.
And something bounced out of my on deck, so I don't see it. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. I think we need to spend a little more time on network design. There's so many places you can trip up. We throw in a router. We certainly don't want to just take the suggestions of 192.168 or perhaps the subnet presented to us, because these networks are growing by leaps and bounds, and yet they're the rails we run on.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we've got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday, Alex has defined it. I think everybody enjoys the fact that it's more philosophical and more talking about the bigger things. But you're right. It would be a shame to not have places where this critical idea of understanding how the network is evolving and all of our work is going to end up there, and we must understand it in so many ways. I mean, for marketing, for just not failing in terms of your technical delivery of assets into it. It critical to understand. Sky has some thoughts about this.
I just think this, again, old school, we had a lot of copper cable. We had to have engineers because it was $1 million pieces of equipment. But now that everything has moved onto the IT backbone, I think that's like the skeleton of our whole industry. So I think it's kind of critical that we have IT in the conversation. Now, where does it fit into video? Again, we're talking about video today, video questions. That's critical too.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to wrap up with the one piece of fun you don't want to have is changing your subnet later. Design it from the ground up right for the first time.
Right, but until you say that and somebody hears it, I know a lot of us wouldn't even understand that there's a topic called subnets that is important to get right before we go farther. And that's why these discussions can be so critical. I can't tell you how many times in the first 6 months I was here on office hours that I didn't hear a term that I was unfamiliar with, and just hearing the term and that inspired me to go do a little more deep dive into it just changed how I completely saw parts of what was happening around me in the world. And as I understood more and more, I started to see things like, oh, I can tell that's an AWS instance, and here's that part. I wouldn't even know that existed until I got into the language. And that's what office hours, that's one of the things that office hours did so well for me. John Preto has a thought before we leave this.
It might be nice to get the Netgear guys that make that specifically AV branded switching infrastructure. I'd love to hear from those guys. I know that they're doing quite well with those, and several of our guys are using that technology. I looked it up, by the way. One 4K 2110 uncompressed stream is over 10 gigs per second. So there you go.
Okay, we're going to have to hurry through these because I just realized that it's 8:57, so we only got a couple more minutes. Let's go on to the next question real quick.
And that comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. It might be helpful to identify resources like organizations that can help us to practice the trade, local community access television, church productions, other opportunities to volunteer and learn.
Yeah, I think going out to some, making them second-hour guests and bringing in exemplars would always be useful. So for those of you who are listening, if you have something in that area, if you have a local church that's doing something really unusual and you think it would really be a benefit to all the people who do that kind of video production, put it in. The great thing about this is it's ecumenical. An idea comes up, everybody votes on it, and that determines whether or not it gets traction. So absolutely. Next question.
The next question comes from Rob Collins in Kansas City in Missouri. If Office Hours does how to make YouTube videos, will there also be other services talked about as well, such as how to stream well on Twitch?
I would certainly hope so. We use these in exemplar language YouTube videos, but sure, Vimeo, Twitch, everybody, Facebook Live, all these things now are portals to use your content and to aggregate an audience, which is what a lot of people are trying to do, trying to get their ideas shared with a large number of people. So yeah, totally. We probably should stop being quite so using that like Kleenex is just the generic term for everything out. Sky, you got something real quick?
Yeah, just real quick. I know a lot of this is technical, and consequently, we haven't even touched on the concept of script or story. And so that's maybe there's an eighth day in the week we can find out time to do that.
Okay, I got to cut you off, and I think sorry, Douglas, I'm going to have to dump your question only because it's 8:59, and I'm not sure if Alex is going to push the button if he's watching. He's going to do it right at 9. Anyway, let's roll the credits. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back tomorrow, and Office Hours will be here every day for you. Thanks.
And we get to read the credits.
There, I thought no one would be whispering.
And I
can't even see the credits in that small window.
Done 3 times.
Nice job, Bill.
Way to go, Jeffrey. Thanks, Chad. Hey.
Thank you, everybody on the back end and here on the panel.
Special thanks to Omo.
Questions, Laura?
3,000 miles. My goodness.
Looks like we made it to the final card. Thanks, everybody.
Get well, Alex.